Again, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Coleman. I'm the Houston president for Regions Bank. And on behalf of myself and our over 200 associates here in Houston, I am very pleased to welcome you to today's event, and even more pleased to have been given the opportunity to partner with PKF and Kane Russell Coleman in delivering the second of a series of focus meetings around the international economy. We're quite pleased to have Russ moderate today's conversation, and certainly hope that you enjoy it. Thank you.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be here today. Obviously, I was here last year. It's one of my favorite events. My connection, obviously, is the relationship that I've had with PKF now that's probably 7.5 years. It's a relationship where they're a sponsor, but they're also a contributor of very popular content on the show called PKF Texas Entrepreneurs Playbook. The first guy that I'm going to ask a question is Frank Landronov, Director of International Tax here at PKF Texas. But let's start off with this question. What is a common misconception that U.S. businesses have in expanding their businesses overseas?
That's a great question, and a question we see a lot of times with particularly our clients that are doing business for the first time overseas. And that's the idea that many of our clients don't think that they've created a taxable presence in a foreign country until they start to actually set up their own office there. When in fact you can actually create a taxable presence in that country for your company through the activities of others. So for example, if in many cases companies start out exporting goods to foreign jurisdictions, that's usually not a problem. But when that particular client wants to do more in a particular market and say, well, we need to have salespeople on the ground, they may contract with independent contractors, distributors, to distribute the product overseas. Well, it depends on how independent those independent contractors are. If they work only for that particular client company, the company in the U.S., then they may actually be acting more in the form of an employee relationship than a independent contractor. So you have to examine some of the complex issues of how independent these individuals are. They're legally and economically independent, and if they're not, they could actually create a taxable presence because you de facto have an office in that jurisdiction and may not realize that you have it.
Hector Escobar, the global trade expert at Regions Bank. When you're doing business internationally, what are the methods of payments?
Letters of credit, I would say, has been for 100 years. It's an undertaking of a bank. The bank is going to guarantee to make the payment, but just please keep in mind that banks only deal with documents. So if there's the discrepancy, not going to get paid. Okay. The other one is it's in regards to export credit insurance. Export credit insurance is it's a peace of mind to the exporter, which you have excellent bank credit insurance, and you also have private sector. So really, what the export credit insurance is is a peace of mind for the exporter, that if the buyer overseas does not pay in, the credit insurance kicks in between 90 and 95% of the international receivable.
All right, up third, and he's new, and so I would like you to kick it off, Gordon Russell. Give us your background.
I've been practicing law in Houston for 3 decades now. I started a law firm with 5 lawyers. Today we have 85 lawyers. We have 191 employees, and we have a business strategy that has a legal component to it. The job creation that we've heard about here and innovation are what have driven our business. If your goal is to build a stable, profitable business that creates continuity of employment for yourself, your family, the people that you care for, that's all very doable in international trade based in Houston.
Okay, up next, Steve Rekob, the Director of U.S. Commercial Services here in Houston. But Steve, why don't you give us just a brief description of the U.S. Commercial Services first?
United States Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service in Houston, Texas, located at 1919 Smith Street. What we do for U.S. businesses and Texas business is to help them grow their business by going internationally. And we get involved with everything from XM Bank money to private lending money to what about regulations? Can I ship here? Is it okay to do this? Okay to do that? But most importantly, our strength is we make matches globally. We have over 100 offices across the United States, and we are on or near every single United States embassy. So no matter what the size of the business, they can sit down with us. We can talk about an export plan, help them to understand key market indicators about their business if they're at the low end, or we can help them with the more sophisticated questions. And then we can help them find partners in a foreign country by reaching out to our offices in those countries and doing some of the services we have to find dealers, distributors, joint ventures, whatever. That's what we're there for. So our total job is to help U.S. companies export, grow their business, grow their jobs here, not take their technology, not manufacture, but to help you find partners overseas to allow you to grow your business. That's kind of the nutshell.
All right, up next, Joe Ringer, Regional Director, Central Region of the Export-Import Bank, more commonly known as the XM Bank. Tell us about the XM Bank, Joe.
Yes, there's only 3 government agencies in the federal government that are profitable. Russ, can you name them?
What's the XM Bank?
That's what.
The other might be the U.S.
We
Commercial
are
Service.
profitable. The name of the bank is a misnomer. We have nothing to do with importing. We were formed in 1934, before many of you were born. And the idea was to do two-way trade between Russia and the United States. Trade with Russia was banned. We banned them again during remember the Carter administration banned them. And they never bothered to change the name of this independent federal government agency, Exim Bank. But we have nothing, I repeat, to do with importing. If you look at the export market here, Texas is the largest exporting state in our country, #1. California is #2, for those of you from California originally. I think Florida was #3, so forth, so on. Harris County, in which most of us reside, we do more small business export financing in Harris County than any other part of the country. Right here, we're in the hotbed of it. If you look at the jobs in our country, what's the job rate? Unemployment is now what, 7.2. If you look at the jobs in our country, one of the only sectors that's a bright spot in our economy is the export market. So who are we looking for at Exim Bank? #1, you have to be in business for 1 full year. You go to a money center bank, they want you in business for at least 3 full years. At Exim Bank, 1 full year. You have to have 1 person working in the business full time. You have to have a positive net worth. We don't say how much, just that you have to have a positive net worth. #4, you have to be exporting either U.S.-made products or services. The products have to be at least 51% or more U.S.-made before you add your markup. The services have to be provided by U.S. citizens, green card holders, or permanent residents. We're open in 145 countries around the world, including Colombia. And we have a number of products. If you're exporting on a short-term basis, which many exporters are, we have programs that allow you to sell on an open account basis up to 180 days. In the event of non-payment for either political or commercial reasons, then you make a claim on us. We have a working capital program. Many companies need working capital. We can guarantee your bank 90% principal plus interest if they will loan you the money to either manufacture the goods for export or to buy the goods for export, and even service companies can use it. The advance rate against manufacturers is 75% for inventory. No bank will finance inventory at that rate. Against foreign receivables, it's 90%. We also have the ability to finance the foreign buyer. I'm working with a company now in the Cameroons.
Steve, I want to go back to you. I sort of grew up in the business world as a sales guy, and I always think of these transactions from that call perspective. But how does one present their company to foreign buyers?
That's a good question, and it varies. And it's funny, sometimes it doesn't coincide with how they present their companies here in the United States. When we get involved with a company for the first time, if they don't have an export plan, we try to help them understand the parameters. Most people, small entrepreneurs, come to us and they will tell us every single feature of the product they have, everything. But they never understand how to position it or how to market it or what the distribution channel is. And it takes a long time to get them to convince them, stop giving us your product features, start thinking about who you're selling it to. I had an example the other day, which I can't give total details to, but this one company had a small product that they were going to do overseas, and they were looking for partners and distributors in Europe. And they thought they were a franchise. In their mind, we are franchising this. So we got together a meeting of potential partners for them in Europe, and what they found out was, as many times as they said franchise, the people on the side says, no, you're not a franchise. We don't understand that. That's not what you are. And we don't want you to talk that way, or we can't do business with you. And so many times we find that how they think here is not how they think there. And our job basically is to help them set up a plan, help them to find partners in another country to do business with, and help them to understand how their product may be viewed in another country.
Frank, what export tax incentives still exist for U.S. companies, and do you expect these tax incentives to stay in place?
Very good question, and kind of like we were talking about earlier, with cooperation with government, to help small businesses be successful. Currently, the U.S. economy, and maybe Steve can correct me on my stats here, my understanding is 12% of the U.S. economy is export related. It's remained flat for the last decade or so, a couple of decades. And one of the president's initiatives back in the State of the Union address a couple of years ago was to double exports in 5 years. So that was really the impetus of this administration. Through a lot of different tax law changes, we were not really sure if some of these incentives would survive, and now have become permanent, so that there's little uncertainty about that. So given that, it's important to talk a little bit more about it. The remaining export tax incentive is something called the IC-DISC. It's the Interest Charge Domestic International Sales Corporation. And what that is it's the only area in the Internal Revenue Code that allows you to set up essentially what's a paper company. And it's nothing new. It started out in the 1970s, and like Steve Rekov, I'm not as young as I look either. And so it started out as a deferral mechanism where companies would arrange to have their U.S.-made exports to be sent overseas and get a tax break for it. But it wasn't a permanent exclusion of income. It was only a deferral when you were ready to pull earnings out of this tax vehicle, then you'd pay tax on it. Then through the last couple of decades, it's gone through a series of changes, and the IC-DISC wasn't so popular anymore because there were other regimes that were more favorable that came into play. And then finally, in the early 2000s, the World Trade Organization said, hey guys, this is an unfair tax subsidy, this is an unfair subsidy, and really forced the government's hand to change these tax incentives. And so a lot of these more favorable incentives went away. So that in conjunction, back in 2003, under President Bush, there was the preferential dividend rate, which made it analogous to the capital gains rate, which back then was 15%. And so where this incentive is so powerful is that normal export income is taxed at regular income rate. It's ordinary necessary business income. It's taxed at a rate of 39.6% if you're an individual or have an S corporation or a partnership. And it allows you to essentially convert this income, if it meets certain criteria, into income that would be now taxed at 23.8%. Why 23.8? Because the income on capital gains rates went up to 20% end of 2012 under the fiscal cliff negotiations, as you recall. And now with the new healthcare tax, that adds another 3.8%. But it's still a powerful arbitrage between 39.6 and 23.8%. And converting income that would be taxed at a much higher, almost 40% if you add in state tax rates, to something much, much lower is a very powerful incentive. And so if any of you are interested in how this works further, I'll be available after the Q&A, go into your specific situation, see whether or not you may qualify.
Thank you, Frank.